Welcome back to Asking for Knowledge. This is episode 17. So we're going to have a continued discussion today on the topic of failure and where it fits in kids' development and what are our roles as parents in this process. We talked about in episode 15, if you want to go back to that one and kind of get a refresher. But this is Asking for Knowledge. I'm your host, Jeff Mabe. We have 3 episode types on this show. We have Asking Out Loud, which is me typically hopping on solo, as has been the case for these first few episodes, just talking through things and just trying to get a better idea of what we are dealing with and giving you questions to ask of yourself. Obviously, it is inherent in the name of the podcast, but we really have more questions than answers here as we go through this process called life and parenting athletes and that sort of thing. And then our next version, which as we get further into our episodes will be more consistent, but asking the experts, so folks that are at the top of the game in a lot of different areas relating to our main topic, which is always first principles on everything youth baseball. And the last version will be asking your parents. So this will be bringing on parents that have either been through the processes of having kids, go through T-ball to high school to potentially college, parents that have had good experiences, parents that have had bad experiences, just giving a perspective, as I imagine most of our audience are parents. It's kind of what we're catering to. But anyway, if this is your first time listening, again, our goal for this podcast is to get to everything first principles on youth baseball. And it may not feel that way. As you listen, as you see the names of the episodes, you might question and be like, I don't know how much this has to do with baseball. But really, it's when we get to first principles, it's layers below what we're talking about. So we'll talk about development, we'll talk about athlete development, we'll talk about the game specifically, and but a lot of it is mindset, mentality, and that's who we are as an organization. Asking for Knowledge exists to help kids master the mentality, mechanics, and joy of baseball. So yes, being physically strong, fast, skilled, having an unbelievably strong mindset, and then actually having fun doing this. That's our goal. That's what we're trying to help young athletes accomplish. So, again, just kind of a quick review from episode 15, continuing the discussion on failure and the role that it plays in the lives of our children. So, recapping there, everybody's heard the terms helicopter parenting, and we kind of questioned what it would look like if we wanted our kids to be anti-fragile. And if you've not come across this term, anti-fragile as defined by Nassim Taleb in the book Anti-Fragile, basically is the idea of things that gain from disorder, things that gain from hardship, things that are improved by difficulty, which is really what we want. And again, we talked in the last episode, or in episode 15, about the idea that, resilient kids is a wonderful thing. But what we really want is anti-fragile. So resilient means hard things happen, they survive, they push through. Anti-fragile means hard things happen and they actually come out better. So I think that's what we really want. And I don't think you'd find a parent out there who doesn't want their kid to be prepared for life's challenges and difficulties. And I think the hard part is letting things play out without intervening. So we're going to keep talking about that today. And that's where I think baseball is such a great sport because, as you've heard, most likely if you've been in there for 10 seconds, Hall of Famers fail 70% of the time in baseball as it relates to hitting. And so there's such a level of failure inherent in the game, even for the absolute best players, that you're kind of forced to deal with it on a recurring basis. And hitting specifically is not getting easier, as evidenced by the averages in Major League Baseball these days. And so it's just a great thing to teach kids about this process. But anyway, so what can this look like? And I love the process, and this is not an idea that I conceived. This is something I got from Charlie Munger, who got from those that came before him. And it's this idea of inversion. So if I want to do something, if I want to accomplish something, or I want some outcome, sometimes one of the best ways to think about it is to invert. And basically the process of inversion is, okay, well, what could I do to make sure this doesn't happen? If I want it to happen, the process of inversion is what, actions could I take? What things could I do that would make sure that it never happened? And so sometimes it's that process. You figure out what wouldn't work and you just don't do those things. So it's the idea of, progress by removing things versus adding to. And so I love using this as an exercise. And so giving you a quick example for those that are married or have been married or thinking about getting married, think about, okay, if I wanted to have a good marriage, how would I go about that? Well, you could sit there all day and say, well, I could do this, 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 and this. Or you could say, well, how would I have a terrible marriage? And that one's pretty easy. It's very easy to come up. We humans tend to think in the negative a lot better than we think in the positive. And so it's really easy to come up with ideas as to what would create a terrible marriage. So you'd have no trust. You wouldn't be able to communicate with one another. You would hold grudges against each other. You would act in your own interest and be selfish. You wouldn't be caring or understanding, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you're getting the idea here. And so the process is pretty easy to say, well, if I just am not those things, if I'm trusting, if I'm loving, if I'm caring, if I'm reliable, if I am, unselfish, then I'm probably going to get pretty close to having a great marriage. So again, it's this process of inversion that allows us to see what not to do in order to have success. So when it comes to kids and failure, we can start talking about, and the idea of when to get involved and when to inject yourself, so to speak, as a parent. We could talk about what it doesn't look like. So if we want our kids to be anti-fragile, what could we do to ensure that they're fragile? So that would look like injecting yourself into every situation. That would look like controlling every variable in their lives to make sure that, you maximize this outcome that you're searching for. It would mean smoothing and paving the way through every possible difficulty that they might encounter. It would, be addressing every variable that they might run into. And I think this would be the definition of that helicopter parenting. And Peter Gray, great book, Free to Learn, if you're interested in education for kids, he calls it directive protective parenting. So you're protecting them, you're directing their lives, and you're controlling everything. So I guess to be more specific in baseball, what would this look like? Well, this would be like team hopping. Every time the coach says something that you don't like or whatever, it would be, always looking for the perfect coach. It would be, always blaming the umpire. It would be, always coming in with new equipment. Every time anything, they don't have. Oh, well, you don't have the right bat. You don't have the right glove. You don't have the right this, that, or the other. That's more with the form that it would take. And this is a good analogy for me. But I want you to picture yourself that every time you step into these circumstances, and this is a fine line, y'all. This is a very fine line. Because there are times we absolutely need to be involved. And, kids are kids, and they don't have the maturity and the foresight. It's not all the time. Matter of fact, it's probably very little of the time. But I don't want to say this is completely hands off. But anyway, just picture yourself every time you inject in these circumstances, you're like stamping your kid or tattooing your kid with a big fragile sign. And I think we've seen this play out in our culture over the last decade or so, where, now, and I have to be careful. I don't want this to sound political, but it's really, I'm presenting it as reality. because it is. It's the idea of safe spaces on campus where, college kids can't bear to hear an idea that is contradictory to what they believe. Like that when you see this played out, that's kind of how it goes, where it's like, picture plugging the ears and, closing the eyes and saying, nah, 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 every time you hear something that it challenges what you believe already. And that's the path that we put them on when we inject ourselves all the way through. And again, I'm not going to get off on that. We'll talk maybe at some point. Actually, I think we talk later in this episode about feelings just briefly, but we'll talk about that at a later time. I don't want to get derailed with that. But I think a lot of this is based on a false premise. And that false premise is the idea that if we can just put like the perfect set of circumstances together, our kids will be successful or exceptional in whatever it is, the endeavor that they're pursuing. And I think that's kind of the big lie, is that it's like some equation. It's just a math equation. Well, if I do A plus B plus C, then the outcome that I want for my kid or that my kid wants for themselves is guaranteed. And, this might be news, but it doesn't work that way. And I mean, I can say that confidently because life is just multivariate. There's just too many things. Every kid's different. Every kid's motivation's different. And so it's going to be incredibly hard if you think you're going to be able to manufacture this thing. And, you might argue, well, how do you know this works or this doesn't work or this mindset's the right one? The reality is I don't. Okay. I'm really here just to help you think. And part of this podcast is me thinking through this process myself. So, just think about it. You don't have to fight with the idea. Excuse me. Just consider it and consider where you're at and what you want for your kids. So, again, one of the things we have to overcome with this is that outcome-based mindset. And, our culture is built around the idea that you don't earn respect if you don't win. And it's hard to sit without a resume of winning. It's hard to get anybody to kind of fall in line with what you believe. And I just don't know that that's the best. That's the best approach, because it is different for everybody. I used to love Jim Rome. Used to say it's too bad that failures don't give seminars, because the information is just as valuable. And again, that goes back to that idea of inversion. But if you think about it, we don't get excited to learn from failures. We don't get excited to learn from people that have messed it up really badly. And I used to always love, the analogy he would give with that. He's like, somebody that's good looking, got a great family, and just screws it all up completely. And he's like, you should want to buy that person a cup of coffee and sit down and be like, hey, you had everything going for you. How'd you screw it all up? To give us an idea of the things not to do, because we're all susceptible to those mistakes and those things. So again, not to veer too far off topic up, maybe we're depending on how you flow with me, you'll understand that in my mind, I'm on topic, but you may be like, hey, let's get more specific here. So I think the key with this whole thing is to really understand what game you're playing. So if we're trying to engineer success in baseball and baseball alone, then it's going to look a certain way. But if we're trying to build young people into, again, this idea of anti-fragile kids, and then young adults, and then eventually adults, if that's our goal, we need to keep a perspective on the actual game that we're playing. And, I do what I do. My goal in coaching, my goal in this podcast, everything I do, it's not to build future major leaguers. It's not to get kids college scholarships. it's not to win, championships. For me, I do what I do in hopes that more kids have more success and more fun and stay in this beautiful game of baseball as long as possible and get the most out of their ability within the game of baseball. Now, if that turns into major league or college scholarships or high school starters or, state champ, whatever. If it turns into that, that's great. But that's not the game I'm playing. So, understanding what we're pursuing and, if there is some scoreboard, how do we put points on that board? I think it's key here because so many times we sign our kids up and we want them to be champions in the sport, and we kind of forget about the other things. And, my poor kids, it's just a running joke in our house. It's, everything's a life lesson. And so they know it's never going to be about baseball. We may be talking about baseball, but it's never going to be about baseball. It's always some deeper thing, And so again, understanding what game you're playing and what game your kids are playing is a great first step into working through this idea of failure. So, we find ourselves at a point, and I think I can say this with confidence. I'm not going to test it out. So just be clear. I can't say definitively, but I don't think it's ever been easier to put together an all-star team of kids. I think if you have any level of competence and, coaching ability, and then you just happen to have 2 or 3, maybe 4 really good players, I think you could easily build like a super team. We've seen it. Our team has been offered to merge with other teams where it's like, oh, we just take the 4 or 5 best off your team, and then, we'll combine them with the 4 or 5 best on our team, and then we'll have a super team. And I just think that's absolutely ridiculous for, 9, 10, 11, 12, even up through, 14s, 15s. It just feels really dumb to me because that's not the game I'm playing. I don't want, banners. I want these kids that are have ridiculous mindsets, in a good way. I want kids to, love the game. I want kids to develop and understand the process for growth. That's the thing for me. So whether they're really good today or, not good at all, that makes no difference to me. Anyway, I feel like I'm getting a little bit off topic here. Hopefully you're tracking with me. But I really want kids that understand that baseball is a tool to help them understand how to overcome the challenges that they are going to face in life and how to work through those things. And so whether it continues in baseball, as I already stated, or it comes in some other form, they have this framework that they can operate out of that gets them the life they want. Maybe that's the best way to say it. I don't know. So let's talk specifics. So, I think it would help to talk more specific around this. So a couple things that I've done this year, which I've always done in some senses, but I'm really kind of scaling it up. And maybe it's the maturity of our kids. Maybe it's that the kids have been with us this in a longer way. So they've kind of we built this all along. But I am really introducing more and more challenging drills and situations for our kids this year, to kind of ratchet up the amount of failure that they experience in practice, because you can't really construct it in a game. I think I don't know that that could be a real thing, but in practice, really challenging them. So cranking up the machine, cranking up the speed, moving it closer to them, working on curveballs out of the machine, that can be difficult. Putting in more difficult drills that really make them think. And then the second part of this is continually over and over again reminding kids that they get a choice. And I think that's one of the biggest things is, as a coach, and I guess you could argue that you're not being a good coach if you don't force the issue with kids. And that could probably be true, right? Because if you know something, you know a way to improve, and you don't share it with them, it would be hard to be considered a good coach. But again, for me, my goal is not championships and major leaguers. It's helping kids understand a process. So I guess what it would look like I'm having trouble articulating this, but is to help kids understand and put themselves in a situation. So it's not always, let me give the illustration here. It's like a kid gets in, and let's just say the kid's wrapping the bat around their head. So the top of the bat's pointing back at the pitcher, creates a really long movement to get the bat back in the zone for them to be able to hit the ball consistently. So it's just not a great thing to wrap the bat around your head like that. Doesn't mean they won't have success. It just means it's going to be harder. But it's the idea that the kid would need me to tell them over and over and over again, nope, get your bat up. Don't point it at me. Don't wrap the bat around your head, over and over and over, versus, hey, this is your swing. Here's an idea about how to be more successful. Take it or leave it. And again, this is probably older kids. It's probably 11s, 12s, 13s, get a little more advanced, able to think for themselves a little bit more, but I'm injecting more of those opportunities where kids get the choice and just continuing to try to present the idea that it's their choice, it's their choice, it's their choice, versus do this, do it because I say so, this is the way to success, this is the way to improve, do it or run, right? And so, again, trying to get kids in a mindset of like, okay, this is hard, right? So when we inject drills and things that induce failure, and kids saying, hey, this is hard. What do I need to do to fix it? Versus, if coach needs me to do something, he'll tell me. Or if coach wants me to do something, he'll tell me. And so I'll just do what coach says. And I want to break that down and eliminate it. I tell every kid I work with, my goal is to coach myself out of a job. Not to make you dependent on me, not to make it such that you need me to help you succeed, but to empower you, to transfer ideas, to give you things to think about, to challenge you with different drills so that you take that and build ownership of, we'll talk hitting specifically, but you build ownership of your swing in such a way that you can continually make your own adjustments. Now, does that mean, you never need me again? Maybe not, but it's okay if you don't, because I want it to be something that's in you, not something that you're continually relying on me to help fix problems. I want kids to grow from the challenges that they will face. And this kind of goes back to the idea that you can't engineer success. Every kid's going to have a different temperament, a different drive, a different experience. They're going to see things differently. They're going to hear things differently. And so how can we ever truly boil down the factors leading to success? I don't know that we can. It is an inside job for every human being. And just keeping the focus on that versus, comply because I'm the coach and I said so. Again, will it work for today? How many of us had hard coaches that operated under that mindset and, we'd probably attribute some of our success to them? Yeah, it's probably true. But if baseball is all we ever do, then that's great, I guess. But if there are other things in life where you have to figure things out on your own, then I think having somebody that's presenting it that way is more beneficial. So let me give you this illustration. Came across this week. I think it's a really good one, but it illuminated this idea for me, okay? A bird and a plane can both fly, right? But how they get there is significantly different, right? Bird flaps its wings, plane needs an engine and propulsion and lift and all these things, right? So some of the same principles apply, but how they get there is extremely different. And so we want so badly to help engineer success for our kids. We want to help shelter them from failure, but birds don't fly without get kicked out of the nest. And planes don't fly without planes crashing beforehand, to build the knowledge, to build the experience, to build the understanding, to be able to fly successfully and safely and consistently. And again, I'm not saying we torture our kids and that sort of thing, but I'm just saying we let them succeed and fail on their own, always presenting the idea of their own agency and their own choices. And we'll probably talk in the next couple episodes about agency, because I think that's one that just does not get talked about enough in a world that does not love taking responsibility and loves to assign blame. So we'll talk about agency. But think about this. How many adventure stories have you ever read where the main character never experienced any kind of challenge or hardship to overcome? The reality is probably none, because those wouldn't be very popular, and it would be boring as all get out. Be the most boring story ever, right? Where's the challenge? Where's the thing to overcome? Look on YouTube. Look at the stuff your kids watch. A lot of it is challenge videos. Well, why are we so enthralled with challenge videos? Look at Mr. Beast. He's built an empire on this. Bigger and bolder and better challenges. We're attracted to it as humans because we want to see people do really hard things and succeed or fail. And it's not any different in our own lives. For our kids in baseball, we should want to see them experience really good teams, experience really good pitching, experience really challenging situations, and succeed or fail. Because that's where the growth is. And I've found that when I present things as really hard and challenging to these kids, it has been amazing to me how they respond. Prior to doing this, we would have, kids get really upset. We'd have kids crying, and this is just like game situations. But now we've developed, and again, it's been a couple-year process, but now we have kids, they have a tough round of BP. Their demeanor does not change, except to maybe get a little more determined. Is some of it emotional maturity? Probably so. But I would rather have a team of kids that say, oh, whoa, that was challenging. What do I need to learn from that? Versus, this coach, he just, doesn't want us to have any fun, doesn't want us to succeed, challenges so much, or whatever, right? You can fill in the blank with a lot of different things. But just giving them the idea to reflect on their own involvement in it. What can I learn? There must be something I'm missing here. It's not impossible. Humans can do it. How do I get there? And I think sadly, oftentimes we only want to address the emotional state with kids because we don't want them to be in that period of discomfort. And so we only kind of cater to that. And so then it becomes, well, we don't want them to feel bad. So let's inject something, right? Oh, you didn't, this is what you get. You didn't do any T work this week. And, I told you weren't. So that's one version, right? Another version is the umpire, blaming the umpire. Another version is blaming the coach or blaming the equipment or whatever. So there's lots of different approaches that we do to kind of solve this discomfort that we see our child experiencing. Think about this, all right? Kids are small. You've ever been around small kids? You see a kid fall down, and you absolutely know that the kid's not hurt. How do you react? We tell them it's okay. We tell them nothing's wrong. Kind of give them a little pat on the bottom. You're fine. You're fine. You're fine. What would happen if we took this approach with sports? Kid strikes out. and we're just like, hey, you're good. All good. Not, the things I just mentioned, right? You didn't work hard enough. You didn't listen to your coach. What's wrong with you? Or, oh, that umpire had it out for you. He's got a terrible zone. Whatever, right? All these different things that we do. What if we just said, like, you're fine. It's cool. Like, hey, what happened? What just happened? Oh, you swung at 3 high balls. Oh, the umpire's been calling low and outside all game long, and you didn't pay attention. You didn't see it, and just hey, it's cool. It's fine. Just adjust next time. Learn from it. Grow from it. Not the emotional response that we tend to have. So I'll say one thing. I have seen that because I've seen this over and over and over again, and it's parents that feel like they have to react, operating under the idea that if they don't, the kid will just get either used to or accept losing, or they won't learn the lesson, or they won't improve. And I got to be honest, I've just not run across many kids that have this temperament. Most kids want to succeed. Most kids want to, again, have success at the thing they're doing. If we're talking about hitting, most kids want to hit bombs, right? That's what they want to do. And so if we take those same kids and we work to break down the thing, if it's hitting, so to speak, into a small enough chunk where they start to have success, their entire demeanors, they're not going to get used to losing. It's just we've got to adjust the game to a level that meets where they're at and then challenge them on the way back up. So if nothing else in this whole episode, it's just don't be afraid to let your kids fail. It does not mean really anything. We don't have to always explain it away. We don't have to always excuse it away. Just point to the lesson. Hey, did you get what you wanted out of that? Right? We played this weekend, had some tough at bats. Did you get what you wanted out of it? And the kids can go, I don't know, Or, do you enjoy striking out? How many kids are going to say yes? None. 0, right? They might get defensive. I don't care, But that's a whole different thing. But it's like, it's okay. It is okay. Put it back in their court. Just say, hey, you make your choices how you want to respond. Yeah, you experienced this, but it doesn't mean anything. I keep coming across this idea of what has meaning and what's information. And I think the best approach when it comes to this, and I've said I think a lot. So hopefully take this as you figure out what your own thinks are. But what's the difference between meaning and information? We're often just ready and willing to assign meaning, but we rarely take things as information. And I think that's the best approach to help us get where we want to be. So I'll close with a couple things here. I've rambled all over the place today, I feel like. But hopefully you've gotten a couple nuggets out of this, or at least things to think about. Gentleman by the name of Larry Ellison. He is the founder of Oracle, and his current net worth sits at $204 billion. I think he's top 10, maybe top 5 richest guys in the world. When he speaks of his childhood upbringing circumstances, he says, this is what he says, direct quote, I had all the disadvantages necessary for success. So again, at least top 10 wealthiest people in the world. And when he speaks of his childhood, he says all the disadvantages necessary for success. I love Stoicism. And there's a lot of reasons. I was introduced to it through a book called The Obstacle's the Way by Ryan Holiday. Wonderful book, very simple book that you can give a kid and they can understand pretty well. But I would say check that one out. It's got a whole series. Obstacles the Way, ego Ego is the Enemy, something like that. Really good books, really good frames. But a lot of people understand a stoic or stoicism as somebody that's just like neutral to everything. And that's really a mischaracterization. That's not true. And I think what makes it great is it is a wonderful philosophy on the way to becoming anti-fragile. And again, we'll talk about this more in future episodes. I know we'll talk about the book, specifically The Obstacle's Way. But here's the thing. So here's what a Stoic truly is. A Stoic is somebody who transforms fear into prudence, pain into information, mistakes into initiation, and desires into undertaking. So I'm going to run through that again. I just think that is so beautiful. Fear into prudence. I don't have to be scared. I just have to be smart about what I'm doing. Pain into information. Okay, this is happening. What is there to learn? How do I stop it? How do I adjust to it? Mistakes into initiation. So making those changes when those things come back. Oh, shoot, I messed up. But now I'm going to initiate this new thing, this new way of thinking, this new process. And then desires into undertaking. So I want to be something. I'm going to get started. Right? I would guess this is what most of us want for our kids. It would be awesome if they're the next Trout, or if they're the next Ohtani, if they're the next MJ. It would be really cool. But I think who they are as a human being is probably what we really want them to focus on, or what we really want our focus to be as parents. And then taking that skill set and that mindset and all the things that go with that into whatever endeavor that they pursue, giving them that foundation. I think that's what we really want. And so understanding that sometimes we serve them best by letting them fail, by letting them experience challenges, by making them think through things on their own. I think we're going to get closer to where we want to be with this. That's my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. I hope it made you think. If you're enjoying the show, please share it. If you think it's the dumbest thing you've ever heard, go ahead and share it. Sometimes those are the best things. You get a good laugh. But if you are enjoying it, follow or subscribe. We're out there on all major platforms. Participate in our survey. So go to the website, click survey at the top, go in there, fill that out. We want more information, or as much as we can get, on what's going out there in the world, especially as it relates to youth baseball. Again, that's our focus, not all youth sports, even though we end up talking in those terms a lot of times. But let us know what you think. Find us on social media. And until next time, keep asking for knowledge.